There's a special kind of audacity it takes to try and steal water, especially in a part of the country where a single dry season can turn a thriving ranch into a dust bowl. It's like stealing a man's bloodline. My family has ranched this land for 5 generations, and for all 150 of those years, the Whispering Spring has been its heart. It's a modest little oasis, bubbling up from an artesian source, nestled in a grove of cottonwoods right where my property meets the sprawling acreage of the old Miller place. For as long as anyone can remember, the spring has been a shared resource, a testament to the neighborly handshake agreements that built this valley. But handshakes and history mean very little to people with new money and no respect. My name is Arthur, and I'm what you might call a semi-retired rancher. The truth is, my first career, the one that paid for the modern upgrades to this old homestead, was as a professional cartographer and historical land surveyor. For 30 years, I mapped forgotten territories, untangled centuries-old boundary disputes for governments, and learned that the earth keeps a record of everything if you just know how to read it. Now, all I wanted was peace, the lowing of my cattle, and the familiar murmur of the spring. That peace was shattered the day Brenda Garrett bought the Miller place. She was a city developer, dripping with cash from selling soulless glass towers, and she saw our valley not as a home, but as a portfolio. Her first act wasn't to introduce herself, but to send a team of surveyors who planted a line of garish pink flags 20 feet inside my property line, neatly encompassing the entire Whispering Spring. What Brenda didn't know, what she couldn't possibly comprehend, was that my life's work wasn't just about raising cattle. It was about understanding the very land she was trying to steal, down to its oldest secrets and forgotten laws. She thought she was picking a fight with a simple old rancher. She was about to find out she had started a war with a mapmaker who knew exactly where all the bodies and all the boundaries were buried. Have you ever had someone so brazenly try to take what's yours, convinced their power made them right? It's a story as old as time, but I promise you, the way this one ends is anything but ordinary. Brenda was about to learn that the deepest lines aren't drawn with fences, but with history itself. My first instinct was to handle things the old way, the neighborly way. I grabbed the original 1888 plat map from my grandfather's files, a beautiful, hand-drawn document registered with the county, and a more recent 1972 survey my father had commissioned. Both clearly showed the spring straddling the boundary line, with a shared access easement recorded in the county ledger. I walked over, maps in hand, expecting a simple misunderstanding. I found Brenda by the pink flags, directing a small crew with post-hole diggers. She stood there in pristine, brand-new ranch where that had never seen a speck of real dust, talking on her phone about synergizing her pastoral assets. When she finally graced me with her attention, her smile was thin and sharp. I laid out the maps on the hood of my dusty pickup. "Morning," I said, keeping my voice even. "Name's Arthur, your new neighbor. Looks like your survey team made a bit of a mistake. This spring has been shared access for over a century. These maps show the proper line." She gave the documents a cursory, dismissive glance. "Oh, that's sweet," she cooed, her voice dripping with condescension. "Antiques. My survey was done with GPS, satellite linked. It's accurate to the millimeter. This spring is on my land. All of it." I pointed to the recorded easement number on the old plat. "This is a legally binding document, Ms. Garrett. It's on file at the courthouse. Your title search should have shown it." She laughed, a short, sharp bark. "Lawyers handle all that. Paper gets old, Arthur. Things change. Progress. My fence is going up. My insurance requires me to secure my property." She turned her back on me, a clear dismissal, and barked at her crew to get to work. The message was clear. My history was irrelevant. My rights were an inconvenience, and her wealth was the only law that mattered. The diggers fired up, their mechanical shrieks tearing into the quiet morning air, each one a spit in the face of my family's legacy. I felt a hot flash of anger, the kind that makes you want to do something rash. But I took a deep breath. She wanted to play by the rules of power and money. Fine, but she was playing on my home field, and I knew the terrain better than she could ever imagine. I wasn't going to fight her with lawyers billing by the hour. That was her game. I was going to beat her with a truth she was too arrogant to even look for. Back in my study, surrounded by the comforting smell of old paper and leather-bound books, the frustration began to cool and harden into pure, cold determination. The room is my sanctuary, walls lined not with trophies, but with framed maps, ancient sea charts, territorial surveys, and geological cross-sections. This was where I had untangled, complex legal challenges for paying clients for 3 decades. Now I was my own client, and the stakes were far more personal. Brenda was right about one thing. A head-to-head legal battle over surveys would be a nightmare. She'd hire a big city law firm to bury me in motions and depositions, bleeding me dry until I either gave in or sold off half my herd to pay the bills. I couldn't win her game, so I had to change the game entirely. I pushed the boundary maps aside. The fight wasn't about a few feet of land anymore. It was about the spring itself. I started digging, not through property law, but through history, geology, and biology. I pulled out my great-grandfather's journals. He wasn't just a rancher. He was a passionate amateur naturalist. His spidery cursive filled dozens of notebooks with observations about the land. For weeks, he documented the goings-on at the Whispering Spring. He wrote about the water's unusual clarity, its constant temperature year-round, and its surprising resilience during the great droughts of the 1890s. Then I found it. An entry from May 1892. "Observe the small, pale salamander again today," he wrote. "It resides only in the shaded grottos of the spring, nowhere else. Its skin is almost translucent. A creature of this specific water, I believe. I shall call it the ghost salamander of Whispering Spring." A jolt went through me. An endemic species? One unique to a single location? That was a potential game changer. I cross-referenced his notes with state wildlife databases. Nothing. No official record. It was a creature known only to my family's private history. My search broadened. I pulled out old geological surveys from the U.S. Geological Survey archives, ones I had worked with in my professional days. I analyzed the strata charts and aquifer maps for our valley. The Whispering Spring wasn't just a simple surface spring. The data suggested it was a window into the Ogallala Aquifer, a significant hydrological feature. It wasn't just a watering hole. It was a crucial outlet for a vast underground reservoir. This was the aha moment, the turning point in any strategic campaign. Brenda saw a puddle to be fenced. I was beginning to see a unique, irreplaceable natural landmark. She wanted to own it. I was starting to realize that maybe nobody should. The pieces were beginning to click into place, forming the outline of a strategy so far beyond a simple property dispute that Brenda would never see it coming. My great-grandfather's ghost salamander and the spring's connection to the aquifer were powerful discoveries. They shifted the argument from mine versus yours to something far more significant. This wasn't just a resource, it was a habitat. It was a vital piece of the valley's entire ecological puzzle. I spent the next few days buried in research, not on property lines, but on state and federal preservation laws. I studied the criteria for designating an area as a protected natural area, a state natural monument, or a critical habitat. The requirements were steep, designed to prevent frivolous claims. You needed proof of unique geological features, historical significance, and the crown jewel, the presence of a rare, threatened, or endemic species. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had potential evidence for all three. The geological surveys suggested the unique connection to the aquifer. My family's journals, along with old county records I later found that mentioned the spring as a key stop on an old pioneer cattle trail, provided the historical context. And the ghost salamander was the biological linchpin. But my great-grandfather's notes from 130 years ago weren't enough. I needed modern, scientific verification. This was the most delicate part of the plan. I had to operate quietly, without alerting Brenda. Her thinking I had given up was my greatest advantage. Through a contact from my old surveying days, I got the name of Dr. Eleanor Vance, a respected herpetologist at the State University who specialized in Appalachian amphibians. I called her, explained the situation carefully, and emailed her scans of my great-grandfather's detailed drawings and notes. I expected skepticism. Instead, I got palpable excitement. The possibility of a previously undocumented subspecies of salamander, especially one isolated in such a specific environment, was a biologist's dream. She agreed to drive out the following weekend, unofficially, to see for herself. While Brenda's fence posts went up one by one, a monument to her arrogance, I was laying the foundations for a very different kind of monument, one built of law, science, and history. My plan was no longer about winning an argument. It was about securing a legacy. I would not just save the spring for my cattle. I would save it for everyone forever. And in doing so, I would beat Brenda so thoroughly, so completely, that she would be left with nothing but an expensive fence surrounding a place she could never, ever touch. The day Dr. Vance arrived, I felt a nervous energy I hadn't experienced since my first major solo cartography expedition. I met her at the county road and led her to the spring through a back route, avoiding the main path where Brenda's construction crew was working. Eleanor was a woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor and eyes that missed nothing. She carried a small kit with vials, nets, and a waterproof camera. As we approached the spring, she moved with a quiet reverence, her earlier excitement replaced by focused professionalism. She spent nearly 3 hours at the site. She tested the water's pH and temperature, took samples of the algae, and carefully, gently, explored the small, shaded rock formations my great-grandfather had called grottos. For a long while. There was nothing. Brenda's crew was taking a lunch break, and the only sounds were the wind in the cottonwoods and the gentle burble of the water. My hope began to wane. Maybe the salamanders had died out. Maybe my great-grandfather had been mistaken. Then Eleanor froze. She pointed a slow, deliberate finger toward a submerged crevice. "There," she whispered. I followed her gaze, and I saw it. A tiny creature, no more than 3 inches long, pale as milk glass, with faint, feathery gills. It was exactly as my great-grandfather had described it. The ghost salamander of Whispering Spring was real. Eleanor managed to net one specimen carefully, photograph it extensively, and take a small tissue sample for DNA analysis before releasing it unharmed. "Arthur," she said, her voice filled with awe, "this is incredible. It's a neotenic species, retaining its juvenile features. And its pigmentation. It's completely adapted to this specific limestone-filtered water. This is a new subspecies, maybe even a full species. It's scientifically significant." Her confirmation was the keystone of my entire strategy. While she returned to her lab to write her official report and sequence the DNA, I moved on to the next phase. I hired a hydrologist, an old colleague named Ben, to conduct a formal study of the spring's output and its connection to the aquifer. His report was unequivocal. The spring was a major discharge point, and any contamination or blockage could have serious repercussions for well water levels throughout the entire lower valley. Armed with Eleanor's preliminary findings and Ben's hydrological report, I began the meticulous process of filling out the official petition to the State Natural Resources Commission to designate the Whispering Spring and its associated artesian system as a protected state natural monument. The paperwork was immense, requiring geological data, biological proof, historical affidavits, and detailed maps, which I drew myself with a precision that bordered on obsession. All the while, Brenda's fence neared completion. She'd occasionally see me from a distance, watching from my porch, and offer a smug little wave. In her mind, I was a defeated old man, wistfully gazing at what he had lost. She had no idea I wasn't watching what I'd lost. I was watching what the entire state was about to gain. The final post of Brenda's fence was pounded into the ground on a Thursday. To celebrate her victory and the beautification of her new estate, she planned a lavish party for that Saturday. Invitations, printed on ostentatiously thick cardstock, went out to every wealthy landowner and local business person she wanted to impress. It was to be a sunset soiree at the Springs, a grand unveiling of her newly secured asset. In an act of supreme, calculated arrogance, she even had one of her staff drop an invitation in my mailbox. Tucked inside was a handwritten note. "No hard feelings, Arthur. Come see what a little vision can do for this tired old valley." B. I chuckled, tossing the invitation onto the pile of documents for my petition. My vision for the valley was a little different from hers. I spent that week making final preparations, not for a party, but for a reckoning. Dr. Vance's official report came in, confirming the salamander was indeed a unique, undocumented subspecies. She had already christened it Eurycea murmura, the whispering salamander. My hydrologist, Ben, provided a sworn affidavit with his findings. I got another affidavit from the head of the local historical society, confirming the spring's role as a vital waypoint on the Chisholm Trail. My petition was no longer just a collection of claims. It was a fortress of indisputable facts built by experts. On Friday afternoon, I drove to the state capitol and hand-delivered the entire package to the clerk of the Natural Resources Commission. The clerk, a kindly woman who seemed impressed by the sheer weight and organization of the binder, stamped it as received and informed me that a preliminary review and site visit would be scheduled within the next few business days. The timing was almost poetic. Brenda's party was a spectacle. From my porch, I could see the string lights twinkling in the cottonwoods and hear the faint sound of a live band. Luxury cars lined the county road. It was a public coronation, a broadcast of her dominance. She was showing everyone that she had taken a piece of our shared history and made it exclusively hers. I stayed home, polishing the final details of my presentation for the commission, feeling a calm, profound sense of anticipation. She was celebrating a battle she thought she'd won. She had no idea the real war was scheduled to begin at 9 o'clock on Monday morning, and she had already been outmaneuvered. The sunset that Saturday was brilliant, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and purple. For Brenda and her guests, it was a backdrop for champagne toasts. For me, it was the last sunset on a privately disputed piece of land. The next time the sun rose on the Whispering Spring, it would belong to history. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear. At precisely 8:45 a.m., a convoy of 3 dark green state government vehicles pulled up to my gate. I was waiting for them, dressed not in my work clothes, but in a respectable tweed jacket. Out stepped a group of 5 people. The man in the lead, Thomas Pritchard, was the head of the State Natural Resources Commission's review board. With him were Dr. Vance, my hydrologist Ben, a stern-looking woman from the state's Historical Preservation Office, and a uniformed agent from the Environmental Protection Division. This wasn't just a review board. It was an official delegation, a multi-departmental show of force. I greeted them, and we walked together toward the spring. As we approached, we saw Brenda. She was standing by her brand-new, 6-foot-tall cedar fence, a mug of coffee in her hand, admiring her handiwork. She saw our group approaching, and a smug, curious look crossed her face. She likely assumed I'd filed some petty complaint with the county zoning board, and that these were just bureaucrats I'd managed to drag out for a look. She was about to have the worst morning of her very privileged life. "Arthur," she called out, her voice oozing false friendliness. "To what do I owe the honor of this committee meeting?" I didn't say a word. I simply stood back and ceded the floor to Mr. Pritchard. He was a tall man with a serious face that did not invite argument. He stopped directly in front of her, his gaze level and firm. "Ma'am," he began, his voice official and devoid of warmth. "My name is Thomas Pritchard with the State Natural Resources Commission. We are here today on a formal site visit regarding a petition to designate the geological and biological feature known as the Whispering Spring as a protected state natural monument." Brenda's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. "A what? A monument? That's ridiculous. This is private property. I just had it surveyed." Mr. Pritchard didn't even glance at her fence. "The petition," he continued, holding up a copy of the binder I had so carefully assembled, "presents compelling evidence of unique ecological and historical significance that may grant the state jurisdiction regardless of surface property lines." The color started to drain from Brenda's face as the reality of the situation began to dawn on her. This wasn't about a fence. This was about something far bigger. The trap was sprung. Brenda stood there, momentarily speechless, her coffee mug clutched in a white-knuckled grip. Her air of untouchable superiority evaporated, replaced by a dawning horror. Mr. Pritchard, with the calm demeanor of a man who held all the cards, continued his methodical dismantling of her world. The designation is based on 3 primary criteria, all of which have been met with substantial preliminary evidence, he stated, flipping open the binder. First, historical significance. He gestured to the woman from the preservation office, who stepped forward. Our office has cross-referenced Mr. Calloway's family records with state archives, she said crisply. We can confirm the Whispering Spring was a documented, crucial water stop on the historic Chisholm Cattle Trail from 1870 to 1895. Its preservation is a matter of state heritage, Brenda stammered. Heritage? It's a puddle in my backyard. Pritchard ignored her, turning to Dr. Vance. Second, unique biological importance. Dr. Vance stepped forward, her expression academic and severe. Ms. Garrett, this spring is the sole habitat for a previously undocumented neotenic salamander species, Eurysea murmura. My team has confirmed its existence and genetic uniqueness. Under state environmental law, this makes the spring a critical habitat. Any disturbance, such as the construction you've undertaken, is a significant violation. The word violation hung in the air. The uniformed EPA agent took a half-step forward, his presence a silent threat. Finally, Pritchard gestured to Ben. And third, geological and hydrological importance. The spring is a rare artesian window to the Ogallala Aquifer. This report confirms that its health is vital to the water table of this entire valley. He closed the binder with a definitive snap. Given this evidence, the Commission has issued an immediate temporary injunction. All construction must cease. Furthermore, this fence, he said, finally acknowledging the structure with a sweep of his hand, is in direct violation of state access requirements for a pending monument site. You have 48 hours to remove it. At your own expense, Brenda's face was a mask of disbelief and rage. You can't do this. I'll call my lawyer. This is my land. Mr. Pritchard handed her the official injunction papers. Please, have your lawyer call our general counsel. Their number is on that document. In the meantime, the state is asserting protective custody of this site. Any interference with the spring, its water, or its wildlife will result in civil penalties starting at $10,000 per day and potential criminal charges. She looked from the official papers to my face. For the first time, she saw me not as a folksy old rancher, but as the architect of her humiliation. Her expensive survey, her new fence, her power plays, they were all rendered meaningless by a few ancient journals and a tiny, pale salamander. She had tried to steal a piece of my land, and in response, I had used the law to give it to history itself, locking her out forever. The aftermath was swift and brutal for Brenda, and deeply, quietly satisfying for me. Her high-powered lawyer, accustomed to corporate mergers and real estate squabbles, was completely out of his depth. He came in blustering about property rights and trespass, only to be met with the iron wall of environmental protection statutes and historical preservation acts. He was a shark in a swimming pool who suddenly found himself in the deep ocean, surrounded by creatures he didn't understand. The State Natural Resources Commission fast-tracked the final designation. The evidence was simply too overwhelming to ignore. Within 2 months, the Whispering Spring was officially declared the Whispering Spring State Natural and Historical Preserve. Brenda was forced to pay a crew to dismantle the brand-new fence she had so proudly built. The sight of her watching them tear down her monument to arrogance, post by post, was a masterclass in schadenfreude. She was also hit with a hefty fine for the initial disturbance of a critical habitat, a penalty that made the local papers and served as a rather public rebuke of her methods. The state, in its wisdom, erected its own modest fence, not to keep people out, but to protect the delicate ecosystem immediately around the spring's edge. They put up a beautiful, professionally made bronze plaque. It detailed the spring's history as a pioneer landmark, its unique geological function, and its status as the sole habitat of Eurysea murmura the whispering salamander. And at the bottom, in small but clear letters, it read, Historical data and initial species identification courtesy of the Callaway Family Archives, 1888 present. My family's legacy was now etched into state history. The new designation didn't take away my water rights. In fact, it protected them more securely than any handshake agreement ever could. A formal easement guaranteed my ranch access to the water in perpetuity, managed and protected by the state. Brenda was left with a sprawling, expensive ranch bordering a public monument she couldn't touch, a permanent reminder of her defeat. She put the property on the market less than a year later, unable to stomach the daily humiliation. The new owners are a young family who actually want to be part of the community. They read the plaque, and the first thing they did was come over and introduce themselves. We shook hands right there by the spring. The dust has long since settled, both literally and figuratively. The valley is quieter now, the peace I craved restored and reinforced. The whispering spring still murmurs in the cottonwood grove, but its sound carries a new weight, a new meaning. It's no longer just a feature of my ranch. It's a protected piece of a much larger story, a testament to the fact that some things are too important to be owned by any single person. Looking back, I realized Brenda's aggression was a blessing in disguise. If she had been reasonable, we might have settled on a simple line adjustment, and the spring's true significance would have remained hidden in my great-grandfather's dusty journals. Her arrogance forced me to look deeper, to fight smarter, and to find a solution that was bigger than my own grievance. I didn't just win a dispute. I secured a piece of natural heritage for generations to come. My victory wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet, methodical, and absolute, achieved not with force, but with knowledge. It was a victory won in archives and labs, with maps and microscopes. It proved that true power doesn't always come from the biggest bank account or the most aggressive lawyer. Sometimes it comes from understanding the history written on the land itself and knowing the right rules to play by. The moral of this story isn't just about standing up to a bully. It's about the power of changing the frame of a problem. When faced with a fight you can't win on your opponent's terms, you have to find a way to move the battle to a field where your own unique knowledge gives you the high ground. Brenda wanted to fight about ownership. I changed the fight to be about preservation. She couldn't compete there. So, let me leave you with this question. What seemingly insurmountable problem in your life could be solved if you stopped looking at it head-on and instead searched for a different door, a hidden leverage point that your opponent is too arrogant or too blind to see? The most elegant solutions are rarely the most obvious ones.